Welcome to the What I Wish I Knew After Pregnancy Loss podcast. I am your host, Shana Southern. I am an angel mum, a rainbow mum, a pregnancy loss practitioner, and trauma-informed coach. I created the Institute of Healing Through Pregnancy Loss out of my own experience with loss in the hopes to provide understanding and healing, educating people on pregnancy loss, and creating more women or men in trained support roles. In this podcast, I hope to shed light on what I wish I knew in relation to pregnancy loss, opening up the conversation, breaking the stigma, and bringing real-life stories plus guest experts. Thank you for being here with me today, and let's dive into today's episode. Hello, beautiful souls. Today's episode is a part 1 of a part 2 series. So I hope you enjoy listening into part 1 and make sure that you do listen into part 2 when it becomes available as well. Now let's dive in. Welcome, beautiful souls, to the What I Wish I Knew After Pregnancy Loss podcast. Today I have with me the lovely Sabrina Fletcher. Sabrina is the TFMR doula. She lost her second baby to a termination for medical reasons in 2018. She experienced a lack of care in her pregnancy loss and since made it into her life mission to support families through diagnosis to ending a wanted pregnancy and in the grief beyond. Welcome to the show, Sabrina.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sharna. And thank you for having me on and opening up the space for talk about this type of pregnancy loss that sometimes gets pushed to taboo, or even in some pregnancy loss circles, not even seen as pregnancy loss. So from the bottom of my heart and along with all of my community members, we say thank you.
You're so welcome. It is, like you said, it's such an important topic to bring awareness to because it is so, like, pregnancy loss and everything that is normally spoken about, miscarriage, stillbirth, is very stigmatized itself. And termination is just that next layer of, let's really not talk about this.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm so grateful that you're here and we can have this conversation and we can bring this to the table and have a really valuable discussion about this type of loss. Did you want to share a little bit about your story?
Sure. Just before I start, I just want to say that even being here is a really healing and validating experience to be on a broad pregnancy loss stage. So thanks again.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you so much for being here and being the beautiful person that you are in this space.
Thank you. Thank you. Like you said in my introduction, my second pregnancy was the pregnancy that I lost to termination for medical reasons, which currently we use the acronym TFMR. So I will refer to it as such throughout this episode. Other people may only use pregnancy loss or termination, or some people also want to destigmatize the word abortion in itself. And so they use for their loss to talk about that part of the loss. Because yes, there was a choice, a decision, although it's not that simple. So I can go back to when I found out I was pregnant with this baby. We were elated. We were just married. We had a child before we were married. So she was about 4 at that time. And even she was over the moon. She was so happy that, her little brother or sister was on their way. She would kiss my belly and sing to my belly and she would sing, "I hope you're a girl. I hope you're a girl." She really wanted a little sister. And I would just say, we don't get to choose that. But it was really sweet to see that she already had a connection to this baby in my womb, and we all did. And I think that that's a big part of the grief of pregnancy loss, is that the bonds, when you say, yes, we're going ahead with this pregnancy. Yes, we're waiting for this baby. Yes, we want to have another baby. Even if the pregnancy is a surprise, which that happens, once you decide, yes, and you're going you're going to go for it, then it's a whole other psychological, emotional, spiritual experience with that being that is coming through the womb, or, however you think of this pre space where the baby is. And so, yeah, we were just really happy. And then there was a scan where we found out that she was really sick. It was around 13 weeks. So that's pretty much 3 months of pregnancy, like 3 months of waiting, 3 months of thinking, 3 months of talking about names, 3 months of should we move? What are we going to do about, our work schedules? Or, will he need to work more? Will I need to work less? Or what's that going to look like? What's it going to look like with 2 kids? So it was still a big chunk of time where we were waiting for this baby. And finding out that she was sick was so heartbreaking. It was so, so devastating. I've heard it referred to as the moment where people are told, I'm sorry, there's no heartbeat. So if you've been through a miscarriage or a stillbirth like that, where you're told, I'm sorry, there's no heartbeat, it's a very similar experience to be told, I'm sorry, your baby is so sick and they may not make it. Or I'm sorry, your baby is so sick and this is what their life could look like. So it's this wall of devastation and heartbreak. And, I was there in the, not wearing my clothes, like in the little medical robe and totally vulnerable and like spread open and getting this news. And then so the doctor explained what it could be. We could tell on the ultrasound that she had hydrops, which is swelling in different parts of the body. And with my baby, it was pretty much the whole body, the torso, the head, the back of the neck. The back of the neck was such extreme swelling that it even had a different name. There was a second condition or symptom that was presenting, cystic hygroma, like 2 big sacs in the back of the neck. And that all of that was pointing to some sort of genetic anomaly, perhaps. And yet, because of the law, we didn't have time to find out exactly why. So I'll never know why she was sick. I mean, we do know that she had these conditions, but the underlying why, we don't know. And I know this happens with a multitude of different types of pregnancy loss. We don't know why. Sometimes there is a why, and still, even under that, there's still another why. Like, why this condition, or why this brain bleed, or why did my pregnancy go wrong in this way? There's still this big why to sit with. And the doctor said at that ultrasound, he said, I don't know what your religious beliefs are on termination, but many parents who are faced with what your baby have do choose that. But that was all the information that he was able. I said, would it be you? What, I was just looking for the information. I hadn't even decided then. This was just like 5 minutes after getting the bad news. And he said, well, who's your gynecologist? Oh, you could ask her and then she could refer you. So it was like all of a sudden, I already felt like a criminal, even just for thinking about it, even just for asking about it. He obviously didn't feel comfortable being able to directly refer me to someone who could do the D&C or D&E, whatever the procedure type would be. And I know he does them. So he does them when it's a natural death, a natural fetal demise, or whatever the medical terms are. I know they're always changing, but I know that he does those procedures, but he was unable to do it for us, which added another layer of shame, secrecy, silence around the whole situation. So we were sent home with a piece of paper, with her, I don't know, ailments, conditions, and what he thought it possibly could be, which he thought it could be Turner syndrome. But I asked him in that appointment, could we find out, the genetics of the baby? And at this time, I think even still, it's very rare to get NIPT testing in Mexico. So I'm originally from California, but all of this happened in Mexico. I'm married to a Mexican man and we live here in Mexico. And so all of this happened here in this country where I am. So I asked him, could we find out if there's a genetic reason? And he said, well, you would have to wait until 18 weeks and then we could do an amniocentesis. But he said, but if you wait that long, then you've timed out of the limits and you would have to take your case to a local hospital and it would go through an ethics committee. And the bile still rises up in my stomach when I think about that. When I even think about, the name of that committee, they're deciding if the medical procedure that I'm deeming fit for my body and for my child and for their future is up to them to decide if it's ethical or not. So all of this was happening just in the course of 30 minutes, an hour. And then, we went home and fell into a big Google hole, big research hole of every single free paper I could find on all these different types of conditions, all the numbers. I wanted to know the percentages of this, if it could possibly be linked to some other disorder. Maybe our baby had T21, Downs, and all of these other conditions. And the doctor had also said, well, the baby, the fetus is still so small, we can't really tell what's going on with her heart or that we don't know what the sex was. We say her. I just feel like it was a her. But, he couldn't visualize the heart. She was still just so small. So we don't even know, was there a heart condition? Was this or that? And I really couldn't wait around for another stage of development, another stage of fetal development to really get the whole picture. I was locked into this time frame. He also said in the appointment, if you're going to decide now. It's like, okay, well, I would decide what and decide with what information. I was locked out of the information that I really needed to make a informed decision. And that was the information that we had to go on. We did decide to terminate the pregnancy, to end our wanted pregnancy, because the outcomes just didn't seem like any of the outcomes, even if she would have made it to term, having different conditions, it just wasn't the right decision for our family or for her suffering, for her well-being, for her quality of life. And I didn't even want to risk the 1%, 2%, 5%, 10% chance of her surviving, but surviving with who knows what condition, because we weren't even able to get testing to find out what or why. And so I did get a referral from the gynecologist that he had, refer me to someone else. And the procedure happened in an abortion clinic, which I don't know if now I regret going through that or if I knew it was going to be safe because I knew that they do these procedures every day and they have the staff and they have the medical expertise. And I found out that they had a therapist on site that would see us before and after. And so I thought, well, that sounds like a good system. They have the whole system set up. It sounds like, I'll get the care that I need. And no, on that day, the nurses didn't understand why I was crying. I'm like, this is a wanted baby. I'm crying because I'm losing my baby. I'm crying because my baby is dying inside of my womb. I'm crying because, I don't know, you're going to do an ultrasound on me. And, her heart actually could have stopped between the last time, we saw her on the ultrasound and today. That really was something that could have been reality. And there are people in my community who that has happened to, where they've decided on a termination for medical reasons in clinic. And they say, oh, actually, there's no heartbeat. The baby has passed because they were very sick for whatever reason. Or if the pregnant person, if they're sick for whatever reason, or if the pregnancy is just a sick pregnancy. So yeah, the nurses didn't know how to deal with my tears, with my emotions. We kept asking for a separate room, a separate space. because we were there with all these other people and they weren't like wailing and crying and mourning. It was a different psychological experience for the other people there and for us that day. And one of the nurses, or even the therapist at one point, said, "We just don't get that many cases like this." So that made me feel great. I'm like, great. I'm even more of a freak of nature. I'm feeling even more alone. I'm feeling like, okay, I guess everybody else just has healthy pregnancies and healthy babies. And, this just happened to me, happened to anybody else. And I guess it happens to other people. They don't come here, or I don't know. Or maybe they don't share their whole story as they're going through the abortion clinic, line. I really don't know. And even on that day, I was asking her for grief resources and she was like, I don't know about that. I mean, I'm able to laugh now because it's 5 years ago now. It's not funny. It's not funny. It's horrific. It's absolutely horrid that I was treated like that they didn't have, the space to hold space for my grief of a grieving mother. And I just wanted to scream at everyone, like, I am a grieving mother. I'm grieving my child. I guess one of the saving graces was the actual doctor who did our procedure. He saw us the day before and he did say, "I'm so sorry, that your baby is sick." Like, he understood. And then on that day or the day before, or maybe we had called him the night before and said, we really would like handprints, footprints, if you can get them. And he said, "Oh, yeah, we don't usually do that." Again, really do that, but I'll see if I can. And he was able to get my baby's footprints. And so I really, really treasure those. I remember him handing them to me after the procedure, and they're just very, very precious. And I looked at them right away. And I know that many people have different experiences with the mementos or photos or footprints. Some people want to look at them, some people don't. But for me in that moment, it was a comfort. It was like the only piece of validation that I got that whole day, that yes, you're grieving this child. And he had put both of our last names like printed, like typed out and printed out on that piece of paper. So I was like, oh, okay, she's part of our family. These are her last names too. And I really cherish that. But yeah, how often for the nurses to say, "I'm so sorry for your loss." They did hand me tissues, but then they would just turn around and walk away. They didn't know how to handle me. They didn't know how to handle my grief. And me constantly asking for my husband, they were like, "No, he can't be here. Why are you even asking that?" I mean, like I said before, I'm laughing now, but it's not funny. It's not funny at all.
That baffles me.
So yeah, that's my story. If you want to ask any questions, go ahead, Sharna.
One in 4 pregnancies will result in miscarriage. 1 in 8 women will experience infertility. 1 in 100 women will experience recurrent miscarriage. And 1 in 160 births end in stillbirth. Have you been wanting to make a difference in the lives of women or men who have experienced pregnancy loss because you can see so many suffering in silence, but you just don't know how? Collectively, we can change how bereaved parents can access mental, physical, and emotional support after their experience. There is a lot of women with unhealed trauma, and there is a huge gap in the current support system when it comes to bereaved parents' recovery after loss. There are too many women and men suffering in silence. The Pregnancy Loss Practitioner Certification is a worldwide, one-of-a-kind program that gives you proven methods designed for healthcare professionals, medical staff, midwives, nurses, doulas, birth workers, coaches, and angel parents alike. The Pregnancy Loss Practitioner Certification is bridging that gap. It will give you a proven support structure to follow and education specific to pregnancy loss, created by a lost mum. It is creating more education specifically for loss so that you can enhance your service and become the point of difference. Or you can create the support that you so desperately needed in your healing after loss. This is the next level of growth and expansion you have been searching for. So does this sound like something that you have been searching for? Let's explore this more together. You can head to the episode show notes where you'll find the program application, or direct message me on Instagram and let's open up the conversation in how you can use this education. You have a gift, and I look forward to supporting you and witnessing you bring your gift to the world, healing and transforming women's lives. There's so many similarities in a sense in terms of how the medical system fails you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I obviously haven't been down the path of termination, so I can't speak to that. But in terms of my miscarriage, like how insensitive and how they lack empathy and compassion.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
For the place that you went to even have a therapist and the therapist couldn't even support you is just, it's beyond me, because I'm like, that's what their training is for, isn't it? Like,
Right?
why are
Isn't
they
it?
even, why are they even in this clinic when there would be, I'm just assuming there would be at some level, some women are going to experience, guilt, shame, blame, grief.
Grief. Yeah. Even for a lifestyle abortion, of course. Of course.
I would assume.
Of course.
So,
Yeah.
I don't understand how going to a place where that was their main focus, you still lacked that support and understanding. And even the fact that they were denying, your husband to be there with you, I could only imagine, it is an isolating experience having to go through a miscarriage when, people still don't know how to support you, but it's talked about more often. But I still felt like I was like the only woman going through it.
Yeah.
But to be treated
like
this way. Yeah. I mean, for you, that's that next level, then that next added layer of, let's not talk about this. Why are you emotional? Like, what's actually happening to you? Like looking at you like a crazy person. And then that's going to make you feel like you're even more alone and even more like, like you said, a freak. I'm just like, I'm just so sorry that that was your experience. And I know before we started recording, you touched on how you felt like you were a criminal, even having to go and find the places that you could safely get the termination. And it felt like, it was all under the table. Like no one really wanted to talk about it. It was all hush, hush. To do that while you're grieving, while you're trying to comprehend, what's actually happening to you and your body and your baby. Like I could only imagine the enormity of it all for you and the trauma that you would have been going through.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I really appreciate
You're so
seen.
welcome. Yeah. It's that the moment where we truly do begin to heal is the moment that we are seen. And that could start at the beginning. That could start.
Oh, surely.
When you're going to see the medical professionals. It doesn't have to be such a big experience.
Yeah. And not everyone who goes through TFMR has the same experience. Thank God. Some people do have very well-trained or grief-informed staff and medical providers around them who hold their hand or cry along with them or say, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry you have to go through this. I'm so sorry your baby is sick. Or I'm so sorry you need to choose this. And we're here to help you.
A little bit of humanity, like just to have that feeling of like, you don't need to know what I'm going through, but just to have someone on the outside of you just to validate what you're going through. And
yeah, I mean, if someone is crying tears, probably they hurt.
Mm.
So,
Yeah. You think that would just be sort of human decency to, if someone is crying, to sit there with them, not just hand you a tissue and turn their back on you. Just spend a little bit of time. You don't have to know. You don't have to have the words. You don't have to have the secrets, the answers. Just be there. And,
yeah. And it literally would have taken 3 more seconds out of their day. I wasn't asking the nurses to sit down and, listen to my whole story from the conception and my wedding. And, I didn't, I didn't need to tell them my whole, what I was feeling on that day was a pregnancy loss. What I was experiencing that day was the experience of a bereaved mother.
And, unfortunately, this has been your experience, but out of it, you have been able to educate and provide safe places for others and give them that sense of validation and being seen, probably that you wish you had.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's the reason why I became a pregnancy loss doula, specifically a TFMR doula, because there's just such a need in this space. And then afterwards, the grief process takes the time that it's going to take. And we continue to love and grieve our babies for the rest of our lives. But it doesn't have to be a sad, tragic breakdown every single day of my life for the rest of my life. But I think I've been able to get to that place because I was held in community. So I found the TFMR community through the Facebook group Ending a Wanted Pregnancy, like a few days after my loss. And that helped so much, so much. And I wanted to provide even more support. So I've created my own Facebook group as well. There are a lot more TFMR online spaces now, thank goodness. Mine is called the TFMR Support Circle. And they're all a little different flavor because they're different things that each of us need as we grieve. And some people join, 6 or 10 different groups. And some people join one and say, okay, I'm just going to stay here and get to know these people and, learn from them and listen to how they're coping and what's working in grief for them and how they're handling, anti-choice friends and family, laws happening in their home state or home country. When we come together, it doesn't feel so lonely. It's really the antidote to the isolating experience that I had on that day. I do a lot of healing work where I go back to myself on that day and I surround myself with this community. So really, I wasn't alone on that day. I just didn't know them yet.
That's a beautiful way to go back and heal that part of you, that felt so isolated and so alone and that you were doing this, on your own. Luckily, there are these communities out there. I didn't actually get to find anything for pregnancy loss for me until a year or so after. So I navigated
quite a while.
Yeah. I may have been living under a rock. I don't know. But I don't think it dawned on me to look for it because I felt like I was the only one going through it. So I'm like, why would there be groups about it? Why would there be support?
Mm-hmm.
Because no one's talking about it. So I was like, well, it didn't actually dawn on me to actively seek out support groups until I did. And I don't know how it happened, how I stumbled across the group or groups. There's a lot of them. There isn't any in Australia though, so that's why I created my own as well.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot in America, in the UK, but I was just I don't know. It was probably more that I just didn't. I assumed again that no one else was going through this. So why would there be, thousands of other people in a group talking about their experience?
Yeah. Yeah. And if I would have just stayed in the energy of that day, I could have been like that too, because they were saying your abortion, your procedure, your choice, the therapist kept saying, "You're doing this for you." And I just wanted to shake her. I'm like, "I'm doing this for me. I'm not doing this for me." I mean, yes, there are lots of different decisions and lots of different reasons. And I did factor into it. My family factored into it, and my living daughter factored into it, and future children factored into it, and our finances and my marriage. All of that was a factor, but it was so much more than that.
Yeah. It wasn't the one reason, the sole reason. Just before we jumped on, we were talking about some of the myths that you kind of want to bust when it comes to TFMR and the way that it's perceived.
Mm,
Did you want to start sharing your
yeah. Yeah. Let's move
pieces?
into those. So we had narrowed down about 5 myths that we wanted to share today. So I'll share myth number 1. This was a choice. There's a tagline with that. So this was a choice. This was your decision. So don't be sad about it, which is not true.
No.
I remember looking for support after going through this experience. And I thought, okay, well, there are pro-choice organizations. There are people who have been through this, right? There've got to be other people who have been through this. Maybe I can get some emotional support, in that sector. And I would look and I would see a lot of stories about people talking about their lifestyle abortions, which is a different, like I said, different emotional, different psychological experience. And a lot of those stories that they would really push out, things like, I don't regret my decision. I didn't feel anything. I don't feel grief. I'm not grieving. And that very well may be those people's experience. But with termination for medical reasons, it was a wanted pregnancy. So when you lose a wanted pregnancy for whatever reason, for whatever decision, for whatever choice, for whatever condition, or for whatever, even if it's a spontaneous miscarriage or stillbirth, we grieve that child, we grieve that baby. So actually, the opposite of this myth is, because it was a choice and because it was a decision, that is another layer and a lot of deep digging that I have to do and go through the grief and shame and guilt around having made that choice. And that's something that we do within these communities. So I have another layer. I call that program Ascend. It's a TFMR grief circle. And this is what we really go into in that place together, with like 5 or 6 of us staying together for 3-month long period. And we look at this, the choice, the decision part, and the fact that there's this myth out there that says, well, it was your choice, so don't be so sad. It's like, okay, well, what about if your uncle is dying and there's no hope and he's on, all of the tubes and life support, and the doctors say at one point, he could stay on life support, but there's nothing more that we can do. If you take that uncle off of life support, oh, it was your choice, so don't be sad about it. It just doesn't translate. It's a loved member of your family who you've had to make an end of life decision for.
And like you said, it just adds that next layer of, emotions, beliefs about yourself, guilt, shame, blame, that you have to go through, because it's not a choice that you want to make, but it's almost a choice that is kind of, forced upon you. And, if you could do it over again, and everything was going to be fine, like you wouldn't do it, you wouldn't make that decision. But in that moment, with the information you have been given and the diagnosis and everything, and often, like you said before, it's also pushed on you in a time frame that is very limited. So then you're like trying to make this huge life choice in such a short period of time with a lack of information. And then you're almost left on your own to try and deal with it. So then it's, I love that you actually are able to support people through that, because
Mm.
Like, it is the complete opposite to that statement. You are going to be going through the emotional process of grief, but on
Mm-hmm.
top of that, you've had to make a conscious decision.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I just want to add that when people get these life-limiting diagnoses for their baby or their own body and pregnancy, or even a fatal diagnosis for their baby, some people do choose to continue the pregnancy and they'll get this same stuff thrown at them. Like if they're talking about how hard it was to go through their baby's death or to raise their child, with the lack of help in the medical profession or no knowledge because it's a rare diagnosis or what have you, people will still say to them, well, it was your choice.
Mm.
So don't be sad about it. It's like, we're damned if we do and we're damned if we don't.
Yeah. Thanks.
Parent shaming.
Yeah.
And for those people, it's not a choice either.
Mm. Yeah. It makes the whole recovery and healing journey that extra bit harder because they have that next level of ignorance from society, from people
Mm-hmm.
around them.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's go on to number 2. So if you're listening to this and you go ahead and do that, get some water, come back. So these are big issues. Number 2, another myth is we don't love our babies. And I see this sentiment tossed around in some pregnancy groups, like when people are still pregnant with a living fetus, with a living baby, and they're talking about this testing and they say, oh, I'm not going to get testing because I would love my baby either way. Well, we love our babies either way. The love is there, and the love is the reason for the decisions.
Because like you said, there's so much that's factored into that decision. And love is always, and when you're talking before about, you were thinking ahead going, I want my baby, if I was to give birth, to have quality of life.
Mm-hmm.
At any moment, that love, it never goes away. It's always there. And you're making every decision for that baby through the lens of love. How can they get the best out of this? The baby get the best out of the experience. And if you can't see that there is going to be, any good that will come from it, that you don't see there's going to be any quality of life, like, it's not a decision that you make on a whim.
No.
And you absolutely do love your baby. And I think that statement would be like a stab in the heart for you, like for the mum that's actually having to go through and navigate, whether they're still navigating it or life after making the decision. It would be like a huge slap in the face.
Yeah, a lot of people who are going through another pregnancy after their termination, they find that they can't be in regular pregnancy groups. And I know that this happens for anyone going through pregnancy after loss. There's just so much that they're like, oh my God, the gender, or what theme is the nursery going to be? And it's like, there is so much more to pregnancy than that, because now we know. Now we know the other side. Now we know the real life tragedy side of things. And a lot of people are still in this la innocent land around their pregnancies. And I'm actually jealous, that they have that experience. But it's hard to be in those spaces after we've gone through what we have. And then to top it all off, then after they talk about, what color blue they're going to paint there's the little line. Well, I'm not doing testing because I would love my baby anyway. It's like, you have no idea.
You feel like almost grabbing them and shaking them and going, you just don't get it.
I just had to see myself out of all of those spaces because I did have a pregnancy after loss. My daughter is 4 now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I couldn't be in those regular spaces because I wanted to talk about, the different NIPT companies and what week would be a good week and what the other testing is, or, after a clear NIPT, should I still do CVS or amniocentesis or extra scans, or even for my own well-being or mental health. And all of that is love too. It's love for the baby that comes after. So we love these babies. We love our babies. Of course we love our babies. It's a big myth.
When it is a wanted pregnancy, you see those lines to say that you're pregnant. It's an instant love. Like that, I think is the true definition of love is blind. Because you can't see your baby, but your baby is that line in that moment. And
yeah, right.
there's instant connection, instant love. And yeah, I don't see at any point that going away and then you making any decision from the place of like, oh no, I don't love them anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. I would even say, I've never had a lifestyle abortion myself, but I would say that many people who get a lifestyle abortion too, they love their babies and that's why they're making that decision, or they love that potential baby so much that they don't want to bring them into this world at this time. But it's also because of love. So it's a myth.
Big myth. Thank you for listening in with me today. I hope you found this episode helpful. If you did, I would absolutely love to hear from you. Take a screenshot of this episode, share it to social media, and tag me at Institute of Healing_PL. I love seeing what is resonating with you right now. If you want to chat further, I invite you to connect with me through Instagram. Head over and follow my Instagram account, send me a DM, and let's open the communication. If you want to know more about how you can be the support for others, head to the show notes and fill out the application form for the Pregnancy Loss Practitioner certification. I want to also note here that what I share within the episodes is not medical advice. If you need further support, please consult your doctor. Thank you again. Much love to you. Be gentle with yourself, and I look forward to supporting you on the next episode.